Hello and welcome to my heritage interview. I am here with my dad. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Leah. Thanks for having me. My name is Michael Winter. I am 50 years old today. I was born in 1975 in Munich, Germany. I moved to the US in 2007 with my wife and with you, Aliyah. When you were a little baby, there was a job opportunity that opened up with Microsoft. That was the reason behind our move. And now it is 2025. We're still here. We have two more kids, and we are enjoying our life over here in the United States.
Perfect. So for my first question is, what are the things that come to mind when you think of your childhood in Germany? What was it like growing up there?
I would say mostly I have fond memories. It was a very loving environment. My parents were very loving people. Both passed away, and I think freedom is something that comes to mind when I think about my childhood. We would spend a lot of time outside. We were considered the latchkey generation, right? Parents would work all day. I would come home from school, and yeah, it's the classic keychain around your neck, and then being out and about. It was a very a free time, a very very beautiful time. I really miss that.
And what was school like for you?
School, elementary school was wonderful. Was a wonderful experience. Loving teachers, really invested teachers. All good memories. I was a good student in elementary school, which set me on a certain trajectory, right, to go what we call in Germany the Gymnasium, which is basically the school that prepares you for university, for college. My grades deteriorated after elementary school, but I hope that the scope of this interview is pretty much the elementary school, only good memories. And my school, I should add, was just around the corner from where we lived, right? So it was only a 2-minute walk to get to school. And the recess area outside the sports field was right next to our house, right? So my mom, when she wasn't working, she would be able to see me down there as I was playing with my friends.
That's really sweet. What are the things that your parents taught you, such as morals, traditions, and tips? Would you say that these are cultural to Germany?
Yeah, one thing comes to mind that my mom always told me that her dad would tell her not to be scared of anyone, but to do the right thing. And this is, I think, one of the mottos I try to live by, just do the right thing, make good decisions. I would say that's one example, which is not necessarily, tied to any German culture. I think this is one of the universal morals, right? I think when it comes to German attributes, I probably, carry a lot of those in me, but that happened in a more subtle way, right? It was not, you know, in the form of mottos or themes or spoken, expressed moral systems or morals. It was just basically learning by doing and copying what the parents did, right? Yeah, no, I think that is one thing. And I would add, yeah, like I said before, that love, love played a very central role during my childhood. Don't be afraid to express emotions. Don't be afraid to express love, right? Live life to the fullest when it comes to the emotional aspects. Right?
That's really beautiful. What kind of foods did you eat growing up? Are there any recipes you've taken with you into your adult life and to the United States?
Yeah, there are certain foods that come to mind. For example, my dad's mom, she was from Baden-Württemberg, um, um, aka Schwaben, and she would make what is called Spätzle, like every other week, if not every week, and there are at least 500 different ways to make spätzle. And spätzle is a type of pasta, I would say, a little bit thicker pasta. Again, there's different varieties of spätzle. There are thicker, longer spätzle, shorter spätzle. There's all different kinds of spätzle, but that's something that I really, really loved. My mom also used to make spätzle. She learned it from my dad's mom, right, from her mother-in-law. So that is one thing, a big, big topic, spätzle in our family. And I think also our kids, they love spätzle pretty much. And there are other things, like my mom would make pork roast with dumplings, which is typical Bavarian dish. I love that very, very much. And then when it comes to traditions, for example, Christmas, I think we went a bit against the grain, which has to do also with the background. My parents during the war and after the war, growing up rather poor, right? There was not a lot of money. As such, Christmas, for example, was not a duck or a huge, meatloaf or roast. They would just eat a bratwurst for Christmas. So this is one of the traditions I have fond memories of. Every Christmas Eve, when other families would have a huge meal, we would just have bratwurst with a little bit of sauerkraut and mustard. That was it.
Sounds delicious to me. Speaking of Christmas, how would you say that holidays and celebration differ here then from the way you celebrated them growing up in Germany? So like American traditions versus German traditions.
Yeah, I think basically, regardless of America versus Germany, I think Christmas was much simpler back then, right? It was not as you might call as commercial as it is now, right? Of course, we had our gifts, but the focus was less on loads and loads and mountains of gifts, but more the love aspect and the celebration aspect of it. And of course, then to your point, Aliyah, Christmas differs in a couple of ways in Germany versus the US. For example, we would celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve. So the Christkind brings the presents, right? So the kids would have dinner with their families, and then after dinner, they would then wait for the Christkind, leave the room, and then return back to the room, and then the Christkind would have delivered the gifts. That is Christmas Eve. Whereas in the US, of course, on Christmas Day, we celebrate, and there's Santa. Santa does not play any role when it comes to Christmas per se. Yeah, in Germany, Santa visits kids on December the 6th, and he's accompanied by Krampus. That is the meanie, and his job is basically taking the naughty kids and putting them into the sack and taking them with him. I was always really, really scared of the Krampus because Santa, nice guy, needless to say. And then you have Krampus, he always wore big chains and was dressed in black and had makeup on, really, really scary. So this was I think one of the aspects how you would raise kids in the 70s and 80s, just scare them to some extent. Yeah, that's a huge difference, right? And coming to the US then, obviously it was quite a change for us then to celebrate Christmas on Christmas Day. On the morning of Christmas Day, opening presents while still in your PJs. So this is really, really different from, doing the whole gifts thing in the evening after dinner when you're dressed nicely in a festive mood. Yeah, that are the main differences when it comes to Christmas in Germany compared to the US, I would say.
And for other holidays, most of the American ones are more commercial, correct? Or is it mostly similar to Christmas where there's not many big differences?
Yeah, not to generalize, but I would agree that there are certain holidays that are more commercial here. Prime example, of course, would be Halloween, right? Which um, wasn't a thing in Germany growing up. People knew that there was Halloween, but it wasn't celebrated. I think things have changed a bit, and kids they now walk around collecting candy, but it's obviously it's nothing compared to the U.S., right? And yeah, Thanksgiving, for example, there is an equivalent to Thanksgiving in Germany, but again, it's nowhere as big and as commercial. The extent of it is basically having a nice meal and saying thank you, right? Yeah, but Germans have always, I think, looked towards the Americans when it comes to trends and how to commercialize certain things. So I think there's a number of trends that are now catching on. Is that the right way to
Yes,
say it?
I
Yeah.
think there's definitely truth to that. So, so I know for a fact that you're Sinti. Our viewers may not know what that means. So
Hmm.
could you maybe talk about that a little bit? Were there many in Germany? When did you first learn about this? And like, was it discussed often in your house? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, the Sinti is basically a subgroup of the Romani people. There are other such groups, for example, Roma. Um, yeah, for example, every Sunday morning, my dad would play his favorite gypsy jazz records. So those are fond memories, and those are examples where, I witnessed firsthand, that my dad is a Sinti, and also that he is proud of his roots, which also, I am, yeah.
Do you think you or your father ever experienced any type of prejudice for being Sinti in Germany, or was it really not an issue?
Well, I think he did primarily as a school kid because he was born in 1940. So when he went to school, starting in 1945, 1946, the war had just ended. And that doesn't mean that the mindset had necessarily changed. So, people's mindset, right? There was still a lot of Nazis in Germany. Kids heard from their parents what they thought about Jews, about gypsies, right? So there was a fair amount of bullying that he experienced when he was a school kid. That for sure later in life, yeah, because of his darker skin tone, he would be discriminated against. For example, the famous example is border crossings when he would travel from Germany to Austria to Italy and then back. They would always pull him out and search his car, for example. Of course, there's no 100% proof that this was due to the fact that he was darker or that people thought he was a Sinti, but he thought that was one of the reasons. Overall, I think he kept a pretty low profile. That's what typically people people who belong to minorities do sometimes to prevent discrimination, right? So, for example, because you asked about my experience, I never, approached people and explicitly told them that I have Sinti ancestors, right? So I guess without being explicitly told, I think I learned that the best approach was not necessarily to mention it, right? And as such, um, I, I I would not say that I have ever been discriminated because of my Sinti heritage. Right?
Speaking of family, what is a story you were told about your family or a family member growing up? It could be on the German side or from the Sintis.
Yeah, well, speaking of the Sintis, earlier there was There were a lot of stories, of course, related to the war, related to the Nazi regime, because as many Sinti families, Jew families, or families, who were just not accepted slash disliked slash hated by the Nazis. Our family went through a lot, right? So there's a number of stories. For example, my dad's little brother, he was born during the war. He was 2 or 3 months old when he had to be admitted to a hospital. I don't remember what he had, but it was nothing life-threatening. It was a rather benign issue. Well, he died in that hospital, and my grandparents weren't really told why, what happened. It was kind of a big question mark that still surrounds his death. So my grandparents assumed that because of my grandparents' Sinti heritage, that he was killed, right? And that would be one story. Another story is the following. My dad's aunt, she lost her 4 children in Auschwitz. They were murdered in Auschwitz by the Nazis, and the sad story there is that she was on the train with her children to Auschwitz being deported, and she either was pushed off the train, that's what she told her relatives later, or she jumped off the train. It's not clear, but the net is that she escaped. The children, were, like I said, murdered in Auschwitz. She was later also captured by the Nazis, sent to Auschwitz, and miraculously she survived. Right. Then after the war, her husband divorced her, and what I was told is that he assumed that she left the kids on the train, that she jumped off the train. For the rest of her life, she was mentally unstable, right? So, we don't know what happened there, but this is a really, really, really sad story. Or another one that shows how grotesque the Nazi bureaucracy was back then is my dad's dad, who was a Sinti. He was he was a soldier in World War II, right? Because as Germany started a war with the whole world, they needed everybody they could get, and he was then a member of the German army until they figured out that he is a Sinti, and then they got rid of him. He survived the war. They did not kill him because he was a soldier, right? That saved his life, right? I think even his superiors, they tried to put in a good word to keep him in the army, but that didn't work out. But that just goes to show that that there was a fair amount of really, really sick bureaucracy involved, and luckily there was to some extent chaos embedded in that bureaucracy. A couple of cases fell through the cracks. There were always corner cases where they didn't know what to do, and it seems like my granddad was such a corner case where they were like, okay, he fought, he was in the army, so we're not gonna kill him, right? So, yeah, stories galore, very sad stories, Alia.
I think truly that the German history has its positives, but it is a very dark history as well.
Yes, and it also shows it, if I may add, that not every German supported the Nazis, right? Like a lot of people were against the Nazis. suffered under their regime, right? Because one of the things coming to America, what I noticed is a lot of times when you mention Germany, one is labeled, the German / Nazi, right? To this day, there seems to be, a prejudice connected to being a German, and this is not justified at all.
I have definitely experienced that myself as well. I think people don't really understand that it wasn't so easy to say like no to the Nazis.
Yes.
You would be killed. So some of them had to live in silence, I guess, which isn't like, it was a bad situation on all sides, for sure.
Yeah, it is, imagine it is easier to do nothing, right?
Yeah.
Because keep in mind, while the killings were taking place, while the concentration camps were killing people by the thousands, right? People still had their daily routines, their lives, right? They went to work, they went to the office, and I guess for a lot of them it was just easier to look the other way, right?
I do think, I don't want to touch on that right now, but America is having the same situation a little bit, the start of it, and they don't even realize.
Yeah, I mean, I would lie if I said, I'm not seeing parallels there.
Yeah, it's a tough topic, but to bring us to a positive light again.
Yes.
We discussed your elementary school earlier and how it was right by your house. So what was your neighborhood like growing up? The house you lived in, or apartment, I guess. What was it like?
Yeah, we lived in the city center, the very heart of Munich. It was a predominantly a blue-collar neighborhood, big old apartment buildings built in, between the 1850s and early 1900s. So, everybody knew everybody. It was a really, really great neighborhood. Today, of course, things look different. What was a blue-collar neighborhood back in the days is today not affordable for most people. Like all those old apartment buildings were converted into luxury condos. So what cost my family, for example, around $50 per month, now would be a multi-million-dollar condo, right? Yeah, my grandparents, they moved into the apartment where I grew up in 1940, right before the war got really bad. Yeah, so our house, I think it was built around 1870 or 1880, and one could tell, right? So, yeah, for example, when I grew up, we didn't have a shower, we didn't have a bathtub. There was no such thing in this house, right? So what we would do, I think until I was like 10, 11 years old, this is when my parents installed a shower and bathtub. We would just have like a bath day, for lack of a better term, once a week. It was typically on a Saturday. And, we would fill this huge metal tub with water, and then my mom would put me in there. Yeah. And also, not every apartment had a toilet, right? So it was quite common back then that multiple apartments shared a common restroom, toilet, which in order to get there, you had to leave your apartment, right? It was outside. We were lucky enough to have a restroom, a toilet. Yeah, those were just the good old days. Yeah, old house, and the house was also hit by a bomb during World War II. So one could see when I grew up, still the remnants of the damage there. You could see where the staircase was gone, right? And actually it was hit by two bombs. One damaged the staircase and one damaged the attic, but the house made it through the wall miraculously. It had a basement, one of those classic, very old building, creepy, scary basements, where my dad and later I would go down to fetch coal. Because also we didn't have central heating. What we had was an oven, and we would feed it with coals, and this is how we would keep the apartment warm. And in that basement, our family hid during the war. When there were attacks by British or whatever planes, right? So a lot of history, and I really have fond memories growing up in that very old house.
And you lived with your grandmother and both your parents, correct?
That is correct, yeah. It was a rather big apartment, was 100 square meters. My dad grew up there, then he moved out when he got married, but then later, when his mom, my grandma, was older and sick, and I was just 2 years old, my parents moved back into the apartment to take care of my grandma. And so I grew up there, and I lived there from around 1977 until I would say 1996.
Can you remind our viewers what the name of the street was, or the city area? Because I'm forgetting it right now.
Yeah, the street is Fraunhofer Straße. It's named after a famous astronomer / optician. Is that the correct word?
I think so.
Yeah, Josef Fraunhofer. He built telescopes, very famous. What is it? Münchner, son of the city.
Munich native?
Yeah, a very famous Munich native, Fraunhofer Straße. And the area is called Isar-Vorstadt. So if you look at the city center in Munich, right, this is very close to the city center, Marienplatz, very close, and very close to the river Isar. We have a river that goes to Munich. So yeah, it's a very nice neighborhood, and I can't wait to visit again.
In recent years visiting, it seems to be a bit of an artsy, gay-friendly hotspot. Was it always like this, or do you think this is new in recent years?
Well, the hip factor, yes. I think, like I said, it was a predominantly blue-collar neighborhood, but I believe like late the 60s, maybe early 70s, it had already evolved into Munich's gay district, right? So we had really the highest concentration of gay people in Munich. So growing up, that was normal, right? That was very normal. I didn't know anything else, right? And then I think over the years, it has turned into this hipster thing that only millionaires can afford, which is quite unfortunate. But it's still like a nightlife hotspot. There's a lot of restaurants, a lot of cafes, right? But unfortunately, not people like you and I.
And there are rumors that Freddie Mercury used to live in the area when your parents were living there,
Yes,
correct?
yes. He lived the same neighborhood, I think 2 blocks away in Hans-Sachs-Straße. Yeah, so there's I think you've seen it. There's a monument now, and that was a great time. At that time, not a lot of people knew it, that he was our neighbor. right? But that just goes to show what a great neighborhood it was back then, right? To attract people like him, uh, a neighborhood which allowed him to live freely and comfortably, right, and be himself.
And would you say, maybe this is a little crazy, but would you say that Germans are maybe more open to individuals who have different orientations than Americans from what you've seen so far? Where would you say they're more open to, I guess you could say, people who are a little different, maybe?
Yeah, needless to say, there are people everywhere who are unfortunately, closed-minded, right? But in general, I would say, based on my experience, that there is a general openness to people of all colors and beliefs and orientations. Yeah, especially Munich, the area where I'm from. Yeah, it was never a topic, right? It's always difficult, of course, to generalize, right? But yeah, I think uh, if people say Europeans are open-minded with regard to some aspects, I think it is definitely truth, and it is definitely true. I think when it comes to things like sexual orientation, right? Just be yourself.
That's beautiful. Did you travel often, and if so, where did you go? How do you feel like it compares being a German tourist rather than an American tourist?
Well, the first time that I traveled overseas, I was 21 years old. So all travel when I was a kid or a teenager, I was pretty much focused on Austria, Italy. We would go every year, as a lot of Germans did back then in the 80s, to Italy. We would regularly visit a coastal town. It's along the Adriatic coast. It's called Cesenatico. It's a fisher town, and yeah, the harbor was designed by Leonardo da Vinci.
Oh,
Yeah, of all people. Yeah, we would go there every year, and that's that's still to this day a place whenever I visit that you could call it like one of those happy places, right? So there was Cesenatico, and then also other areas in Italy, Austria. Um, I traveled to France once. There was a student exchange. I spent 2 weeks in Avignon, which was amazing. I would love to travel there again with the family. It's beautiful there. Yeah, so that was that. And yeah, German tourists versus American tourists. I think I've worn both hats, right? Being a German tourist back then and being an American tourist these days. Yeah, I'm not really able to know how, for example, Italians perceive German tourists, right? I think, of course, one thing's for sure, that they welcomed the Germans as a revenue generating machine, right? American tourists, well, not saying that I would agree, but American tourists, I think in general, are perceived as loud, right? And having worked in a hotel as a teenager, I can confirm that a lot of the co-workers, I think they would have signed that Americans are indeed a bit loud, and but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe it is.
so we've traveled a lot as what I would say like an American family, but you said you wear several hats, I guess. sometimes German tourists, sometimes American. You know, when we go somewhere as a family, like New York or something, do you think the way people treat you and us as a family, is it like more so the way you feel that they would treat American tourists, or do you think we're more treated like European tourists? Even though we speak English, of course, you have an accent a little bit, right?
Right.
So,
Tiny.
what do you think?
Yeah, I think there could be a gap when it comes to my own perception, right, and how people obviously see me, right? Because yeah, I don't. It's funny, right? Because a lot of people, including myself, people who have an accent, they don't think they have an accent. Right?
Yeah.
So I think when they let's let's take New York as an example. When people don't know, you know, that I'm not from the U.S. For example, if my kids, like including you, if they would talk to people, then we would be perceived as an American family, no problem, and treated as such, right? If they hear an accent, yeah, could be different, but I can't say that I have noticed that you know, I have been treated as a German versus an American tourist. I think when we travel here in the US, I always consider us an American family visiting an American city. Maybe there's wishful thinking involved on my part, right? Maybe you would be able
Um,
to answer like.
I think I don't really notice anything,
Yeah.
but I feel like maybe when it's just me and my siblings,
Yeah,
it's more easy and obvious that we're American.
yeah,
If you and mom start speaking, I think it's more like, oh, that's a European couple.
yeah,
And I also think that even though we all, like, you know, live here and, you know, me and my siblings grew up here, it's kind of obvious, I think, that we're not like fully American. I think from like the way we dress to the way we hold ourselves and stuff and the way we talk to other people, I think you can kind of tell, because like there are some stereotypes, of course, with different countries, but I do think some of the stereotypes of Germans apply to us a little bit in the way we travel and the way we talk to people a bit.
yeah. And we wear scarves.
Yeah, and scarves are not really in the US, I guess. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting aspect. That's, as they say, that's a great question. Never thought about it. And at the end of the day, right? If you go to a city like New York, what difference does it make? They try to make money, right? They try to sell you the sightseeing tour
Which they
for
did.
$500, right? Regardless, you know, if you're a German or an American. Yeah.
What traditions and customs do you still wish we practiced as a family today? So things you did with your parents maybe that you don't do with us, but you wish you did.
That makes me think. Well, I don't feel that there's any gap, any lack. I think that's an indicator of the fact that, you know, either, you know, whatever I don't do anymore, whatever I don't celebrate anymore, maybe has lost its meaning or has never been maybe meaningful in the first place. I embrace the new and different traditions and celebrations, you know, that I didn't know when I was a kid. For example, as we discussed, Thanksgiving, which I really like. Yeah, so I think I see it as like a book, right? A book has certain chapters, and like those chapters of my childhood, basically they are closed, and whatever maybe small bit we were able to maybe bring over into the present, I appreciate it, I cherish it. But after having said that, I even struggle to think about one, right? Because I think most of the traditions, celebrations are very, very different now, right here.
And for my last question, as a German man in the United States, like, what comes to mind when you think of your heritage? Like, who are you?
Who am I? Well, given the fact that I was born in Munich, Germany, that I grew up there, I spent those also important childhood and teenage years there, the formative years, right? It's clear that I would consider myself a German, right? Although I also carry a U.S. passport, right? So we're all naturalized citizens. What, connected to that is the question, where's home, right? We have a home here, and we have a happy home. I love this home. I love this life that we built. But if we were to use a nationality, for example, culture, as the aspects that define who are you, I would say, yeah, culturally, I'm German. Nationality-wise, yeah, I'm German, and I embrace and I adjust to and adapt whatever is useful and is meaningful to me from different cultures, like in the US here, right? So I'm not, of course, against cultural aspects. I'm open-minded, so I would assume that even though I consider myself a German, etc., that over the years I adopted quite a few American traits, if you will, and I think this is also beautiful. This is what makes me me, and that's also what makes our family this rich mix of cultures, right? Which is not only the US, but it's also Germany, my Sinti heritage, or from your mom, Afghan culture, for example, right? We're a melting pot. And isn't that what America is?
I have one last question that is not on my list, but just came to me. So you came to the US for your job, but if you could go back in time, would you still have made that decision, or would you have never left Germany?
Well, knowing what I know now, feeling how I feel now, the simple answer would be no. I probably would have stayed in Germany, um, uh, which may also be driven by the fact that now, as a 50-year-old, there's a certain longing, there's a desire to return to your point of origin, right? So I don't want to underestimate that this feeling is driven purely by age, right? Um, but yeah, this is how I see it. I would probably stay. One of the big issues is that going back to who are you, I think what I miss is having roots. Of course, Germany is my home, but I feel like I'm between two chairs in a sense, right? But looking back at the time, we were younger. My wife and I, we both wanted to see the world and, experience different cultures. And we had really fallen in love with what we saw here in the US. At the time, it made perfect sense, right? So that's a pretty tricky one. So knowing what I know now, feeling how I feel now, no. But back then it made perfect sense. I don't know if that makes sense. If you we're hoping for a more clear-cut answer, but this is one of the toughest, obviously.
No, I think it makes sense not to have a clear answer on that one, since it's like you can't go back in time, but also you can't move forward back then, you know?
Yeah.
But that's all my questions that I had. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, Malia. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Okay, boom.